A white lawmaker is saved by two homeless black women, but when he brings them home, his neighbors call the police. No one noticed when the car flipped. They only started filming when they saw who was pulling the man out of the flames. Two black women with nowhere to sleep. Congressman Richard Halden tasted metal and ash as he gasped awake, coughing hard while summonino. Two people dragged him from the wreckage of his overturned Tesla. His suit jacket was soaked in blood. The acrid smell of burning rubber clung to his skin. Dazed, he blinked against the strobe of fire truck lights and caught a glimpse of them. One tall, eyes blazing with defiance. The other smaller, mouth tight with worry, both covered in grime and smoke, their ragged clothes flapping in the cold wind of downtown D.C. He had no idea who they were, but they'd just saved his life. In the hospital later, the doctors muttered about lucky timing, barely missed the artery, and miraculous survival. Richard wasn't listening. All he could see was that brief flash, those two women hauling his limp body like he weighed nothing. No camera crews, no political gain, just raw, human bravery. "Who are they?" he asked the nurse, his throat like sandpaper. The nurse glanced at the chart. Didn't leave names. Witnesses say they took off when the paramedics showed up. Homeless, probably. Looked like they lived under the I-395 overpass. Something inside him stirred. Not guilt wasn't the type, but something older, heavier. Like a bruise on his soul he'd ignored too long. The next morning, despite his assistant's protests, Richard left the hospital against orders. He'd spent decades writing bills about community security and vagrancy reform, polished terms for pushing the poor further into the shadows. Now, two of those shadows had dragged him back from death. He told himself it wasn't redemption, just gratitude. It took 3 days to find them. He drove through the underpasses in a government Suburban, eyes scanning the rows of tents and cardboard shanties. The winter wind cut through even the heated cabin, and he saw her, one of them tall, black hoodie pulled low, hands thrust into her coat. "Hey," he called through the window. She froze. For a second, her whole body coiled like she might run. Then she tilted her head and looked at him like someone seeing a ghost. "You," she said flatly. "You're alive." "I owe you," Richard said. "Both of you." Her name was Lila. The younger one was Naomi, 19, with a limp and eyes that didn't trust sunlight. They'd lived on the street for almost a year, since Naomi's leg was shattered in a hit-and-run and they'd lost their place. Lila had once been a youth counselor in Baltimore. Naomi had dreams of culinary school. The fire had burned those dreams along with their IDs and clothes. "I want to help," Richard said. "Come home with me. Just for a while." Lila snorted. "What? You gonna make a PSA? Look how generous the white man is." "No cameras," he said quietly. "Just a warm bed. And maybe got a chance to fix something. For once." They hesitated. But the wind was cruel, and his eyes oddly weren't. So they came. Richard lived in a gated neighborhood in McLean, Virginia. Beige mansions with pristine lawns and cameras at every corner. His driveway alone was longer than the distance from Lila's tent to the highway. The Suburban's wheels crunched the gravel as they pulled in. He showed them the guest house. Clean sheets. Hot water. It should have been a story about second chances. But the first night, as Naomi was learning how to operate the dishwasher and Lila was trying not to cry over a bowl of hot soup, someone knocked on the front door. Hard. Richard opened it. 2 officers stood there, hands resting on their belts. "Congressman Halden," the taller one said. "We got a report of suspicious activity. 2 unknown individuals seen entering your property." Richard's mouth went dry. "They're my guests." The officer's brows rose. "Your guests? We were told they were trespassing. Some neighbors called it in." Richard stepped outside, his jaw tightening. "They saved my life. Pulled me out of a burning car. Do you know how many people just stood there filming while I almost died?" The officers looked at each other. The shorter one shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, we just need to confirm identities." "They're not criminals," Richard snapped. "They're heroes, and they're staying here." The officers didn't argue, but Richard noticed them lingering outside longer than necessary. Watching. Word spread fast. By morning, the neighborhood group chat had exploded. Is it safe? Did they pass background checks? Our children walk these streets. One neighbor wrote, "I have great respect for your work, Congressman, but this isn't the right way to solve homelessness." His phone rang nonstop. Reporters, colleagues, his campaign manager, fuming. "You've lost your damn mind, Rich. What is this, some personal crusade? No, Richard said. This is a debt. For the first time in years, he started missing meetings. Skipped panels. Instead, he helped Naomi apply for Medicaid. Took Lila to the DMV to replace her ID. He sat with them on the porch some nights, listening. Not talking, just out listening. You know, Lila said one night, I testified once. In Annapolis. Told a room full of white men that closing youth centers would cost lives. They nodded, took notes, and did it anyway. Richard stared into the darkness. I probably voted for that. Yeah, she said. Probably. He didn't flinch. He just kept staring out. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. The real storm hit on the 7th day. Someone leaked it to the press. A lawmaker harboring homeless strangers. Unvetted. Unknown background. Photos of Lila and Naomi looking ragged, taken by someone with a long lens from behind a hedge. Fox News spun it into chaos. Social media raged. Some hailed him as a hero. Others accused him of endangering national security. A few said he'd lost his mind or worse, gone woke. And then came the doxing. Lila's past convictions, minor ones, surfaced. Shoplifting. Trespassing. Old scars. The headline read, Homeless hero or criminal in disguise. Richard stood in front of a microphone that Friday, the Capitol steps behind him, cameras flashing like bullets. I was saved by 2 women society had already thrown away, he said. And now I see just how deep the rot goes. We built a system where a person's worth is measured by zip code and skin tone. I wrote laws that helped make that system. And I was wrong. His words rang through the city. But not everyone wanted to hear them. Image prompt. Split composition, left side solid black background with bold white title. A white lawmaker is saved by 2 homeless black women, but when he brings them home, his neighbors call the police. Right side a dramatic scene showing 2 black homeless women pulling an unconscious white man from a burning car. Their faces determined and soot-covered, city skyline, and flashing emergency lights behind them, conveying urgency, courage, and contrast between heroism and social bias. The backlash wasn't just digital. On the 8th day, someone threw a brick through Richard's window. He'd been in the living room, helping Naomi fill out an application for community college classes, GD first, then culinary. The glass shattered like a scream, spraying the floor with tiny shards. Lila instinctively shielded Naomi, dropping to the floor in one smooth, practiced motion. Richard stood frozen, heart thudding like a war drum. On the brick was a taped note. Stay in your lane. The police came, again. This time, their questions were curt. Their eyes flinty. When Richard asked why the neighbors weren't being questioned, one officer looked him dead in the eye and said, because the neighbors didn't bring unstable elements into the community. That night, Lila packed a bag. We're not doing this, she said, voice low but trembling. You put a target on your back for us, and now they want blood. You're going to lose your job. Or worse. Richard blocked the door. You leave, they win. No, she said, her hands shaking. If we stay, you lose. Naomi said nothing. She just stood behind Lila, eyes huge, terrified. For all her strength, she was still a teenager. Still someone who didn't believe people stayed. Not when things got ugly. Then let me lose, Richard whispered. Let me finally lose something that matters. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lila sank into the armchair like she'd been hollowed out. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. I don't know how to trust this. Any of it. He nodded. I wouldn't either. Over the next week, Richard's world narrowed to the confines of his house. Protesters began appearing at the gate. His office was flooded with calls, some supportive, many venomous. He got emails titled Race Traitor and Congressman for the Hood. But something changed too quietly, like cracks in concrete. One of his staffers, a young Latina named Anna, brought groceries to the house. She'd cried when she met Naomi. I was homeless with my mom once. You remind me of her. Another neighbor, an older black veteran who'd never said more than 2 words to Richard, left a note taped to the mailbox. They did what no one else would. You're doing what you should. Don't fold. But the pressure kept building. Inside the Capitol, whispers turned into movement. A handful of senior lawmakers, worried about optics, suggested it might be time for Richard to take a step back. Privately, they warned him. His committee seat was on the line. Re-election was a dream if he didn't correct course. And still, every night, he ate dinner with Lila and Naomi. He learned Naomi loved jazz and hated sweet potatoes. That Lila once had a fiancé who vanished into the prison system after a minor weed charge. He started seeing the ghost cities behind the real ones, the invisible world he had ignored from the comfort of his voting record. One Thursday, Naomi showed him her essay. Why I Want to Learn to Cook. It was simple, honest. Food is how I say I love you, she wrote. But no one ever let me have a kitchen long enough. He wept when he read it. But the world outside didn't care about tears. They wanted retribution. A special ethics committee convened. They called it a review of judgment. Pundits called it political suicide. Richard's lawyer called it war. At the hearing, he stood tall in his gray suit, bruised, exhausted, but unbroken. They listed his violations, like reading from a rap sheet. Housing civilians on personal property without clearance, misuse of government vehicle, failure to notify protective services. But the undertone was clear. He had stepped out of line. Not because of protocol, but because of race. Because of class. Because he brought them into here. When the lead senator, his own party whip, asked him if he regretted his actions, Richard didn't hesitate. No. The room went still. I regret that it took me this long to see the people I spent my career ignoring. I regret every vote I made that hurt people like Lila and Naomi. But I do not regret inviting them into my home. They gave me something politics never could. Truth. There was no applause. Just silence. And then the gavel. The next day, headlines screamed, Halden under fire. Resignation expected. That night, Richard found Naomi on the porch, hugging her knees. I think they're going to take your job, she said. Maybe. Will you hate us for it? He looked at her, this fierce, frightened, brilliant girl, and said, never. The final blow came the next morning. An anonymous source leaked internal emails about Richard's decisions over the years, every compromise, every overlooked injustice, every time he turned his back for the sake of a vote. It was meant to bury him. Instead, it lit a fuse. Lila read the articles with fire in her eyes. You know what this means, right? She said. They're not just trying to ruin you. They're trying to erase what we did. He nodded. Then we make sure they don't. Together, they wrote an op-ed, Naomi's idea. Raw, searing, real. They called it What We See from the Sidewalk. It went viral. They told the world what the system looked like from underneath, though it felt to be called trash by strangers, to sleep on concrete, to be invisible until someone needed a scapegoat or a savior. They told the story of the burning car, of Richard's house, of the night they almost left. And they told it with names. Their names. No more hiding. In the days that followed, something wild happened. A group of high schoolers in Georgia started a fundraiser. An advocacy org in Chicago offered Lila a consulting role. Naomi got an interview with a culinary foundation. Letters poured in from mothers, pastors, students, former convicts. People who saw themselves in the story. People who felt hope. Even Congress flinched. The ethics committee backed off. Quietly. No apology, just retreat. But Richard didn't wait for permission. He called a press conference. He didn't stand behind a podium. He stood on the Capitol lawn, beside Lila and Naomi. I was part of the problem, he said. But now I'm part of the truth. And I'm not going away. This time, there was applause. And behind it, somewhere deeper, the beginning of something else. Not just redemption. Revolution. Image prompt. Split composition. Left side solid black background with bold white title. A white lawmaker is saved by two homeless black women, but when he brings them home, his neighbors call the police. Right side, a dramatic scene showing two black homeless women pulling an unconscious white man from a burning car. Their faces determined and soot-covered, city skyline, and flashing emergency lights behind them, conveying urgency, courage, and contrast between heroism and social bias. The fallout never came the way they expected. There were no impeachment proceedings. No official censures. Instead, the silence became a different kind of punishment. Donors stopped calling. Lobbyists ghosted him. His own colleagues avoided him in the hallways like a contagion. Richard Halden, once a golden boy of fiscal conservatism, had become something else entirely, an inconvenient mirror. But something curious happened too. His town hall meetings, which used to be sparsely attended affairs filled with polite hand-raisers, were suddenly packed. People didn't come to yell. They came to listen. Nurses, bus drivers, teachers, veterans. People like the ones Richard had voted against 1,000 times without ever knowing their faces. He saw them now. Every one. I was one missed paycheck away, said a middle-aged woman with tired eyes. My landlord didn't care. Just like your policies didn't. Richard nodded. I care now. She stared. And for the first time, she didn't scoff. She just said, good. Then fix it. That became his mission. He called it the Reckoning Bill. A sweeping proposal that bundled housing reform, mental health funding, cash bail repeal, and criminal record expungement for nonviolent homeless-related offenses. His staff warned him it was political suicide. He smiled and said, it's policy rebirth. It didn't matter that the bill had no chance. What mattered was that he introduced it. Publicly. Loudly. And that he wasn't alone. Naomi spoke at the hearing, standing behind the same podium where, months ago, Richard had once railed against urban loitering. I was 19 when a man drove through a crosswalk and shattered my hip, she said, voice firm. He kept driving. I didn't get justice. I got eviction. She paused. But I also got a second chance. From someone who had no reason to give it. And that second chance shouldn't depend on luck. It should be law. The room went quiet. Reporters scribbled furiously. One senator wiped his eyes. Afterward, someone asked her what she planned to do next. Naomi smiled. Feed people. She meant it. With a grant from a local nonprofit and some seed funding raised by online supporters, she launched a mobile food truck sidewalk soul. She hired formerly homeless cooks, trained them herself, and parked the truck weekly in under-resourced neighborhoods where healthy food was a luxury. Her sweet potato stew made the front page of the Washington Post. As for Lila, she finally got to stop running. A university sociology department brought her in as a guest speaker. She taught classes titled Invisible America and Systems of Erasure. She told the students, no textbook will show you how the streets steal time. I will. They listened. Some cried. Richard visited one of her lectures. She didn't call him out or praise him. She just nodded at him in the back row, and he knew that was enough. But McLean hadn't forgotten, and not everyone had softened. On the one-year anniversary of the crash, someone spray-painted the gate in dripping red. White traitor. Richard scrubbed it off with his own hands. Naomi watched him from the kitchen window, holding a sponge, her face unreadable. You don't have to do that, she said when he came back in, still breathing hard. Yes, I do, he said simply. Every day. Later that night, as they sat on the porch, Naomi humming softly, Lila rolling a cigarette, Richard asked a question that had been building for months. Why did you pull me out of that car? Lila took a long drag. Because no one else was going to. That's simple. She looked at him, and her voice lost all its edge. Yeah, that's simple. He nodded. And if it were reversed? Naomi spoke up then. We'd still be in that fire. He didn't argue. Because she was right. He'd spent years writing laws that left them there. The second year brought more clarity and more risk. The Reckoning Bill was reintroduced with minor revisions. A few more co-sponsors, mostly young and progressive. Richard toured community shelters, met with youth groups, sat in on midnight AA meetings. The media called it penance. He called it waking up. But politics is a stubborn animal. The bill still stalled. Voted down in committee. Gutted by amendments. Lobbyists applied pressure, and the old guard applied shame. That night, Richard sat in his living room, empty glass in hand, the lights off. Lila walked in, grabbed the remote, and turned the lamp on. Self-pity doesn't suit you. I thought maybe this time it would move, he said. Nothing moves unless you push. He chuckled bitterly. It's hard to push when the whole damn building's built to crush you. She sat beside him. Then stop trying to fix the building. Start building somewhere else. It stuck in his mind. He started calling small-town mayors, local council members, not just in D.C., but across the country. Alabama, Missouri, Oregon, rural voices who'd seen poverty eat their communities alive. Many ignored him, but a few didn't. They called it the Sidewalk Coalition, a network of cities that agreed to pilot small-scale housing-first programs based on Naomi and Lila's experience. Naomi even got invited to the White House. She wore a thrifted suit and held her head like royalty. When the president shook her hand and said, "You're an inspiration," she replied, "I'm a warning." She got a standing ovation. Still, the neighborhood never fully embraced them. McLean was polite, but brittle, passive-aggressive. "Do they still live with you?" One woman asked at the grocery store, as if they were mold he couldn't scrub off. "They live with me," Richard replied. and I live with them. Naomi overheard once. She didn't say anything, but she smiled. Then came the break. The footage from the crash, long buried in phone archives and forgotten cloud drives, surfaced on a podcast about everyday heroes. It showed the full scene: flames, chaos, bystanders frozen, and two women running toward the danger. No masks. No hesitation. Just action. The internet exploded. It rewrote the narrative. They weren't charity cases. They were warriors. A documentary crew approached them. Naomi was wary. Lila flat out refused. But Richard convinced them. Tell it on your terms, he said, or they'll tell it on theirs. The documentary aired 6 months later. Pulled from the fire. It won awards. And for the first time, the hate slowed. Lila got a call from her estranged sister in Atlanta. They hadn't spoken in 8 years. I saw you on Netflix, her sister said. I cried through the whole thing. Naomi's mother, who had abandoned her at 14, sent a letter. No return address. Just one line. You're more than I ever was. I'm sorry. She didn't know what to do with it. But she didn't burn it. And Richard finally started walking without flinching. The day he lost his re-election campaign, he didn't mourn. He grilled burgers in the backyard with Naomi blasting Erykah Badu and Lila yelling about how he still couldn't use seasoning right. The new congressman-elect, a fresh-faced centrist who had once campaigned on restoring normalcy, called to offer him a ceremonial advisory role. Richard declined. I think normal's exactly what got us here. He spent his retirement building tiny homes on abandoned lots. Literally, hammer in hand. Lila helped design them. Naomi oversaw the kitchen units. They weren't perfect, but they were real. One night, an older man stood outside the gate, hands shaking, holding a plastic bag. I heard you help people, he said. Richard let him in. No questions. He gave him soup, a cot, a name tag that said resident. And when the man slept soundly for the first time in weeks, Lila whispered, That's the real revolution, isn't it? Richard nodded. Not votes, not speeches, just seeing people and keeping them warm. Image prompt, split composition, left side solid black background with bold white title. A white lawmaker is saved by two homeless black women, but when he brings them home, his neighbors call the police. Right side a dramatic scene showing two black homeless women pulling an unconscious white man from a burning car. Their faces determined and soot-covered, city skyline, and flashing emergency lights behind them, conveying urgency, courage, and contrast between heroism and social bias. The tiny home community officially named Ashwood Commons grew slowly but deliberately. It started with just 5 units on a vacant lot near the Anacostia River, surrounded by weeds, rusted fences, and skepticism. But within a year, it housed 22 people. By the second, 47. Each home had a lock, a kitchen, a heater that worked. Dignity. Naomi ran the community kitchen, her food truck parked out front, still serving spicy collard wraps and her signature sweet potato stew. Lila handled intake interviews. She could read people like a weathered map. She saw storms before they formed. Richard oversaw funding, grants, zoning meetings. He hated politics, but he knew its language. He'd written it. Now he rewrote it line by line, with hands dirtier than they'd ever been in office. But change, even real and rooted, is never immune to threat. On a frigid January night, 3 homes were torched. They found hate graffiti scrawled across a fence. No free rides. Go back to the streets. One man inside Kenny, a soft-spoken expat, suffered burns on his arms trying to save his service dog. The dog lived. Kenny nearly didn't. Naomi was the first to reach the flames. She emptied 2 fire extinguishers before backup arrived. Her scream when she saw the smoke echoed down the block. Later, in the hospital, Kenny looked at her with tears in his cracked eyes. You didn't have to come. She gripped his hand. You live here. That makes you mine. The arson made national news. Ashwood became a lightning rod again, this time for those who wanted it gone. They called it a danger to the neighborhood, a magnet for those people. Crime rates, property values, all the old arguments. Familiar, tired, brutal. But this time, Ashwood answered back. The residents held a press conference in the charred lot. Naomi stood beside Kenny, his bandaged arms trembling. Lila stood behind a podium built from salvaged wood. She spoke slowly, deliberately. You tried to burn down a home. But this place? It's more than walls. It's memory. It's forgiveness. It's survival. You can't burn that down. Behind them stood Richard, not in front. He knew his place now. Reporters asked, "Do you think it was politically motivated?" Richard answered softly, "I think poverty scares people. And so does truth." Insurance didn't cover arson on temporary shelters. But donations flooded in from retired teachers, single moms, grocery clerks. Naomi's food truck got so many orders she had to shut it down for a week just to restock. And then came the letter. From someone unexpected. The woman who had originally called the police that first night. Richard's neighbor, Mrs. Helen Brodsky, wrote to him. It was handwritten. Shaky cursive. Stained in places, like from coffee or tears. "I was wrong. I saw two women I didn't know, and I assumed the worst. I didn't see the fire. I didn't see the saving. I only saw what I'd been trained to fear. I'm sorry. If you'll let me, I'd like to volunteer at Ashwood. I can paint. I can plant flowers. I want to help." Lila read the letter first. She didn't speak for a long time. When she handed it to Naomi, the younger woman looked at her and asked, "Do you believe her?" Lila exhaled. "I don't know. But if we don't let people change, then what the hell are we doing here?" Helen came the next day. She brought tulip bulbs. They bloomed in spring. The last months of Richard's life moved in rhythms he never expected to love. Morning coffee on the porch. Grant proposals written beside a snoring cat one of the residents had adopted. Sunday dinners with whoever showed up, half of whom had no teeth, all of whom had stories. But time, like truth, never slows for anyone. One day he didn't come outside. Naomi found him in his bedroom, peaceful, dressed in flannel, hand resting on a worn copy of Between the World and Me. No dramatic farewell, no grand speech, just stillness, and the life he'd earned. They buried him at Ashwood, beneath the tulip patch. Hundreds came. Lila gave the eulogy. It wasn't polished. It was raw. He wasn't a savior. He was a man who got it wrong until he didn't. That's all we can ask of anyone. Naomi stood after, holding his photo. "He used to ask me if I hated him," she said. "I didn't. I just didn't believe him. Until I did. A beat. And now, every time I feed someone who hasn't eaten in 2 days, I think of that man in a burning car. And I think, maybe the world can still surprise me." They poured dirt, planted fresh bulbs. In the following months, Ashwood expanded again. A second site opened in Baltimore. Then Detroit. Naomi trained new chefs. Lila trained new counselors. They refused to franchise. They refused to brand it. "Keep it human," Lila said. Always. One rainy afternoon, Naomi received a letter. No return address again. But the handwriting matched the one from her mother. "I saw you on TV. You looked just like your father when you laughed. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope you keep feeding the world. I never could. But maybe you can." She folded it quietly. Didn't speak of it. Instead, she cooked. Her stew tasted richer that night. Ashwood became more than a place. It became an idea. Not grand. Not theoretical. Just real. Tired people resting without fear. Hungry people eating with dignity. Laws changed slowly. Some never did. But hearts? Hearts cracked open. And through the cracks, light spilled in. Years later, a child asked Naomi why all the street names in Ashwood Commons were named after people. Lila Lane, Kinney Court, Richard Way. She knelt beside him. "Because this place is built on lives, not concrete." The boy thought for a moment. "Will there be a street with my name?" Naomi smiled. "Maybe, if you build something worth remembering." And he did. They all did. In the end, it wasn't about one man pulled from a fire. It was about two women who'd lived through fire their whole lives and chose to save someone anyway. They didn't just change a man. They changed the world around him. One soul, one meal, one key, one story at a time. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.